Back in his small room, Ken starts his day the same way. 3 a.m., no hesitation. A quick stretch, then straight into an hour of muscle training. After that, a longer run than usual. He's not thinking about being a boss or owning a casino. For him, the only thing that truly matters is the body he builds every day. By the time the sun's up, he's already ready for work. On his way out, he runs into his neighbor, who casually invites him to their next outing. Ken agrees without much thought. Meanwhile, 7 a.m., an alarm clock rings, and a woman immediately throws it across the room, straight into the trash. Yumin's morning begins. Her room is a mess, but everything else about her is controlled. She moves into her routine, stretching, bending. Her flexibility is almost unreal. She takes care of her body just as seriously. By 8, she's cleaned up and eating a healthy breakfast. Then her phone lights up. A message from Ken. Just a simple hello and an invitation to dinner. At 9, she's already at the station. A report comes in about snatchers in the city, and she immediately recognizes them, the same bikers who targeted her before. By 2 p.m., she's at the prosecutor's office, receiving her disguise for tomorrow's operation. When asked if she's free later, she casually says she already has a date.
At 7 p.m., Yumin met Ken outside the mall. They walked around together, casually shopping. Ken told her she looked cute, just like that, no hesitation. Yumin spotted a dress and said she wanted to try it on. Ken nodded and waited, but the moment he turned around, he froze. Kaylin. Without thinking, Ken immediately bent down and hid between the clothing racks, trying to stay out of sight. He followed her movements carefully, making sure she didn't notice him. However, they bumped into each other, and Ken immediately took the bag and hid. Luckily, she passed by. What Ken didn't realize was that during that moment, he picked up the wrong bag, and no one noticed. When Yumin came out of the fitting room, she asked if something was wrong. Ken brushed it off like nothing happened and invited her to dinner. By 8:30, they were seated in a Chinese restaurant. The atmosphere was light. They talked, laughed, mostly about the food, nothing too serious. For Yumin, though, it meant more. She realized she was genuinely happy whenever she was with Ken. Somewhere along the way, she had started liking him, maybe even more than she wanted to admit. She wondered if she had been trying harder lately, dressing better, acting differently, all because of him. But unlike before, Ken couldn't bring himself to confess, not here, not now. Then suddenly, Ken asked something unexpected. He asked if the bag she was carrying contained her disguise for the upcoming operation and what it looked like. Yumin blinked, then smiled a little. She asked if he really wanted to see it, and before he could answer properly, she said she'd just go change and show him. "Wait here," she said, and walked off.
Yumin stepped into the dressing room and changed, but the moment she looked at herself, she froze. It was a maid outfit, and not just any kind, way more revealing than she expected. She muttered under her breath that the prosecutor must be a complete pervert. From above one of the cubicles, a masked man who had been secretly watching agreed without hesitation. He said she was worth waiting an entire hour in that cramped, smelly bathroom. Yumin immediately recognized him. She reached for her gun, but before she could react, the man sprayed tear gas straight at her. Back at the table, Ken heard her scream. He didn't hesitate. He ran. By the time he got there, 2 masked men were already dragging Yumin away. Ken rushed in and knocked one of them down with a punch. The other tried to use tear gas again, but suddenly stopped. Yumin, with tears in her eyes from the gas, had grabbed him. The man was caught off guard. In the next second, she kicked him hard and shouted that they shouldn't underestimate a female police officer. She quickly moved to handcuff him, but then paused. Something felt off behind her. She turned. Ken was just standing there, completely stunned, staring. Yumin snapped at him to stop, clearly embarrassed. That brief distraction was enough. The 2 masked men took the chance and escaped. Later that night, around 10 p.m., the 2 of them decided to just call it a day and head home. The next morning, Yumin got scolded at the station for wearing an inappropriate disguise. At the same time, Kaylin looked disappointed over the clothes she had gotten. And that's when it hit Ken. The bags had been switched. He paused for a moment, then quietly hoped that Yumin was okay.
A few days later, Ken was woken up early by his neighbor bursting into his room. Everyone was already ready to leave.
Still half asleep, Ken asked if the trip was really today, and his neighbor just laughed, saying it figures that young people forget things like that. Not long after, they were all packed and heading out in a rental car. The mood was light. Everyone was excited, chatting, introducing themselves, laughing like it was just a normal getaway. Along the way, 2 guys in the group started trying their luck with Mary, a nightclub worker who came along. She shut them down instantly. Without hesitation, she pointed to Ken sitting behind her and said that if she ever chose someone, it would be him. She said that even if he looked broke, he seemed kind, gentle, someone she could trust. What she didn't know, the very club she worked at was owned by Ken. One of the older men in the group suddenly asked Ken why he was still staying in his small place if he worked at a video game company. Ken casually said that yeah, he worked there, but he was still broke. The old man looked confused and asked how that even made sense. Ken just scratched his head, thinking to himself that he was actually the owner of a major casino now. But of course, he couldn't exactly say that out loud. The old man just shook his head and told him to work harder.
Later on, they stopped at a small restaurant that locals swore was the best in the area. Ken liked it immediately. The atmosphere felt calm, real. The food came out and he genuinely enjoyed it. No tension, no pressure, just eating like a normal person for once. After that, they headed to a lake, then to a dam where they decided to have a picnic. While everyone was busy eating and laughing, Ken stood off to the side, quietly looking at the view. His neighbor walked up and asked what he was thinking about. Ken said Mount Jiri came to mind, and how the mountains in Korea had something unique about them. The man asked if he'd been there before, then casually offered him a drink. Everything felt peaceful for a moment. Then suddenly, a kick slammed into the back of Ken's head. Food went flying everywhere. A group of men had arrived. They claimed the area was their territory and quickly noticed that Ken's group was from Seoul. One of them said they had 2 choices, leave or pay. Ken's neighbor tried to speak up, saying they didn't even know who they had just kicked. He didn't get to finish. A punch dropped him instantly. The man repeated the question, leave or pay. Then his eyes landed on Mary. He smirked. Without hesitation, he grabbed her and pulled her close, saying she could be their payment instead. He mocked her, asking if she was a bar hostess and telling her to at least show him some affection. Ken's group started getting angry, but Ken raised his hand and stopped them. Then he did something unexpected. He stepped forward, knelt down, and bowed. He offered money instead and calmly asked them to leave everyone alone. He even told his group that it was their trip money and they could just give it up. His companions were clearly frustrated, even annoyed at him. The man laughed, mocking Ken, calling him pathetic, a coward. He said they weren't just random punks, they were building something, an organization that would soon move to Seoul. And at that moment, Ken's expression changed. As their car was about to leave, someone suddenly noticed. Ken wasn't inside. Mary, still annoyed, said they should just leave him behind. Another person agreed, but Ken's neighbor shook his head and told them to wait. Then he stopped the car. Meanwhile, at a nearby convenience store, Ken casually bought a small bottle of hair gel. A random customer looked at him and said he didn't need it, not when he looked like a beggar. Ken paused, then replied quietly, calling him an idiot. The man just stood there, confused. Back at the picnic spot, the group of thugs was celebrating. They were laughing, counting the money, talking about their plans to move into Seoul. Then a voice came from behind them, calm but heavy. Ken. He said he didn't want things to turn ugly, that's why he stayed quiet and held back his anger. But if they were planning to go to Seoul, then that made them rivals, and he destroys his rivals. Before they could react, Ken moved. A punch dropped one of them instantly. This time, he wasn't the same person. Suit, tie, hair slicked back. The beggar was gone. What stood in front of them now was something else entirely. He moved fast, precise, violent. The rest of them panicked. One of them started apologizing, crying, begging him to stop. Too late. Ken beat them down without hesitation. When it was over, the men were lying on the ground, barely able to move. Ken looked at them and told them to remember one thing. Don't ever prey on people weaker than you. One of them, trembling, asked who he really was. Ken just answered simply, someone from a small city. Not long after, Ken ran back toward the car. By the time he got there, he looked like his usual self again. Messy, quiet, nothing special. He thanked them for waiting, then casually said the money had been returned because he begged for it. Mary looked at him, still disappointed, but no one really questioned it.
And just like that, they continued their trip, stopping for dinner before finally heading home.
Somewhere in Italy, Benito Armani, 18 years old, a mafia hitman for 3 years now. Standing near the Colosseum, he noticed an American woman, and just like that, he was drawn to her. They talked. She was surprised when she heard his last name. One thing led to another, something a little too intimate, a little too fast. Benito casually told her how he had been recruited by a powerful godfather, Don Prego. She didn't expect that. Then Benito checked the time, and his expression changed. He was late. He quickly said goodbye, telling her he had to meet someone at the airport. When he arrived, one of the mafia members immediately cornered him. The man warned him he was lucky the guests hadn't arrived yet. This wasn't just any meeting. Their Korean guests were important, very important. Benito, just an underling for now, was about to meet them for the first time. And among them was someone named Ken.
The moment they arrived, Ken pulled out a camera like a tourist, snapping photos nonstop. It was his first time in Europe, and he looked completely immersed in it. Pickaxe told him to calm down and wait until they got out of the airport, but Ken didn't even listen. One of the mafia men leaned toward Benito and whispered that Ken looked like a complete idiot. Benito didn't answer. Something felt off. Park Tae-soo stepped forward and greeted the man properly. The atmosphere shifted a bit, more formal now. But Benito kept watching Ken. His instincts were telling him something didn't add up. Ken acted carefree, almost clueless, but somehow Benito knew. That man was the boss. They were told to get in the car. The plan was simple: head straight to Don Prego and discuss business. As they drove through Italy, Ken kept looking outside like a kid seeing the world for the first time, smiling, taking it all in. Meanwhile, the mafia man quietly muttered again that Ken was stupid. Benito still said nothing. Then it appeared. Don Prego's castle. Massive, overwhelming. Ken leaned forward from the back seat, eyes wide. He said it didn't even look like a castle, more like a whole city. For a moment, he thought about where they used to stay. Small rooms, tight spaces. This was on a completely different level. As they approached the gates, armed guards stood watch from above. The gates opened slowly, and just like that, they entered Don Prego's territory.
Inside the castle, Don Prego welcomed Tae-soo warmly. He said time really flies. The last time he saw him, he was just a kid. Now he's walking the same path as his father. Tae-soo shook his hand respectfully. Then he told the group he'd be discussing business first. Don Prego nodded and ordered Benito to show the others around the castle. Ken was already moving around, taking pictures like he couldn't get enough of the place. Marin stayed close, translating everything. Pickaxe looked at Benito and casually called him a playboy. Benito smirked and admitted it without hesitation. Pickaxe teased him about his height, but Benito just shrugged it off, saying what really matters isn't something you can judge from the outside. Pickaxe started bragging, but after sizing Benito up, he just backed off and let it go. Then Ken suddenly spoke. He said size doesn't really matter. What makes a man formidable is proving yourself. That caught Benito off guard. For a moment, he just looked at Ken differently.
In a quiet, dim room, Don Prego got straight to the point. He asked Tae-soo what he really wanted. Tae-soo didn't hesitate. He said they needed political influence, especially in the US, and weapons. Don frowned and asked why he wasn't building power in Korea first. Tae-soo said he would, but it wouldn't be enough. That answer made Don pause. He could tell this wasn't something small. Whatever Tae-soo was planning, it was big, dangerous. So he told him to stop holding back and say everything. After all, he was the son of an old friend. Tae-soo looked at him and said it clearly. He had met someone. A man strong enough to build something new. A state. And he would stand beside him. Don Prego snapped. He asked if Tae-soo had lost his mind, if they really thought they could start something like that with a small gang. But Tae-soo didn't waver. He said Ken would become a great man. And only great men can build states. The next day, Ken's phone rang. It was Yumin. They exchanged greetings, casually talking about the time difference between Italy and back home. Ken said he was happy just talking to her, then, without thinking, he mentioned his video game company. A lie. Yumin didn't question it. Instead, she said she was going on a private trip to Italy the next day. Ken's mood instantly lifted. Then she invited him to dinner. Ken froze, because he was always surrounded by gang members and the mafia. Then Yumin added one more thing. She wanted to meet his coworkers too. Tomorrow. And just like that, she hung up. Ken stood there for a second, smiling. Then it hit him. He was in deep trouble.
One cold morning, Benito stepped outside and caught Ken training alone. No warm-up, no hesitation, just fists hitting a tree over and over. Each strike was heavy. His knuckles were already bruised, skin torn, but he didn't stop. Steam rose off his body like the cold couldn't even touch him. Benito watched for a moment, then walked up and greeted him. He asked why he was training out here instead of resting. Ken paused, a bit surprised, mostly because Benito spoke fluent Japanese. Benito shrugged it off, saying he picked it up to charm Japanese women, called himself a jack of all trades. Then he asked if Ken practiced karate. Ken shook his head and said it came from the monks. Then he added something simple. The body is the most important thing. It's the only weapon a man can always rely on. He told Benito he should train every day, too. Benito didn't respond. He just stood there, thinking. Benito walked through the castle halls, still thinking about what he saw earlier. A training freak, yeah. But more than that, it felt like proof, something he'd been trying to confirm. Then he spotted Kaylin. He approached her casually, started talking, smooth, almost too smooth, the kind of words that slip in without resistance. Kaylin got drawn in before she even realized it, like she was under a spell. Benito moved closer, slipped an arm around her, and invited her to come with him. Then, Ken stepped in. A punch came out of nowhere. Benito barely dodged, already hanging from the ceiling like it was nothing. Ken looked up, surprised. Pickaxe immediately started yelling, calling him out for trying something with Kaylin. And just like that, Kaylin lit up, weirdly happy that Ken stepped in. Benito shrugged it off, saying it had nothing to do with them. Pickaxe didn't back down. The two of them started going at it verbally, both of them literally hanging overhead like it was normal. Benito tried using that same charm again. Didn't work. Not on Pickaxe. If anything, it just made him angrier. Ken stepped in again, this time apologizing for what happened. Benito paused. That was it. The second proof. Ken wasn't just strong, he knew how to admit fault. Later on, Don Prego called Benito and gave him a simple task: show their guests around Rome. So the group headed out, moving through the city like tourists. They eventually reached the Vatican, and right in the middle of it, Ken suddenly grabbed his stomach, said he needed to take a dump, urgently. Tae-soo told him to hurry it up, clearly annoyed. Ken apologized and ran off without wasting another second. But that wasn't really the reason. This was his chance. A few streets away, he spotted her, Yumin. She waved at him, wearing a racing outfit, with a bright yellow sports car parked behind her. Ken froze for a second, eyes wide, completely caught off guard. Yumin explained that she accidentally grabbed the wrong suitcase at the airport and ended up stuck with that outfit. She casually added that the car was just a rental. Then she asked him if he didn't like what she was wearing. Ken immediately said he liked it, no hesitation. Inside, though, he was thinking something else. That excuse worked way too well. He could definitely use that again. The two started walking around the city together. Simple things, talking, laughing, just enjoying it. At one point, they were eating ice cream, and while Yumin was just casually chatting, Ken was quietly panicking inside, trying to figure out how he was going to explain disappearing earlier, because as far as everyone else knew, he was still in the bathroom. Yumin noticed something was off right away. She asked if Ken was okay, half joking if he had diarrhea. Ken just nodded. Inside, though, he was already calling himself the worst kind of scum. He didn't have a choice. There was no way she could meet his group. If she found out he was running around with a gang, everything would fall apart. When Ken got back, the group complained that he took way too long. He just stood there thinking, "You have no idea what I'm doing for you guys." He kept checking the time, restless. Then suddenly he grabbed his stomach again, said the pain was getting worse, and ran. When he arrived, he was doing the exact same thing, checking the time, saying a quick goodbye to his bathroom break, then rushing back. The whole day turned into this ridiculous cycle, Ken running back and forth between two worlds. By the end of it, he looked like a corpse, drained, barely holding himself together. His group actually started feeling bad for him. There he was, on his knees, looking like he'd lost half his body weight. He raised a weak hand and told them to be careful, because his diarrhea still wasn't over. Then he got up and ran again.
But Benito wasn't buying it. He'd been watching, and the more he looked at Ken, the less it made sense. Something was off, so instead of ignoring it, Benito decided to follow him.
Benito followed Ken's trail and ended up near the Coliseum, right across from the public restrooms. He smirked a little, figured Ken was smarter than he looked. Then he stepped into the open and saw her, human. For a moment, Benito just stood there, completely taken by how she looked. Before he could move, some Italian guy walked up to her and started talking. Benito didn't hesitate. He stepped in, handled the guy in a way that made him back off instantly, then turned his full attention to human. He greeted her smoothly, complimented her, asked if she was Japanese. Human said she was Korean but fluent in Japanese. That alone caught Benito off guard. So he shifted gears, started talking about the Colosseum, its history, trying to impress her. But honestly, his eyes kept drifting. The longer he looked, the more he noticed. She wasn't just pretty, there was something else there. So he leaned into it, invited her out, wine, a walk. Human politely refused, said she was waiting for someone. Benito kept pushing, trying to work his charm, but nothing landed. Not even a little. Human bowed slightly, apologized again, and repeated she was waiting. When she turned to leave, Benito made one last move, a slick trick, something to make her lose balance. She slipped, and he caught her. For a second, they were close. Too close. Human immediately pushed back, told him to let go, made it clear she wasn't interested, and even mentioned she was part of the Korean police. It didn't matter. Benito still didn't back off. Then, a punch. Ken. He came in fast, no hesitation, and struck Benito clean. Ken's voice snapped right after. He told him straight, touch her again, and he'd kill him. Then he pulled Human close, holding her protectively. Benito steadied himself and looked at Ken. Again, called him stupid for hitting him twice now, even after he already apologized before. Ken didn't even argue. Said he didn't care. Simple as that. And that's when Benito felt it. That strange feeling again. Ken was reckless, stubborn, didn't think things through sometimes. But at the same time, reliable. The kind of person you could actually follow, trust. For some reason, Benito believed that. So he bowed his head slightly and said he understood. That was it. The third proof. Ken wasn't just acting like a boss. He was one. And at the same time, Benito couldn't help but notice something else. The fourth proof. When it comes to Human, Ken was completely hers. The three of them ended up walking toward the Coliseum together. Human and Benito were in front, talking like nothing happened. Ken stayed a few steps behind, quiet, stressed, completely screwed if one wrong word slipped out. Human casually asked Benito if he knew Ken. Benito said yes. Then she followed it up, asked if Benito worked with Ken, said his Korean wasn't great, but was he part of the same company? Ken's heart dropped. Behind them, he subtly bowed, basically begging Benito to play along. Benito saw it, and in that moment, he decided. He smiled, then lied smoothly, said, yeah, Ken works with him, no hesitation. Then he turned it around and asked Human something instead. She's a police officer, right? Human confirmed it, anti-gang unit. Ken froze. Benito already knew. Not long after, Human said goodbye and left. Benito couldn't help but laugh under his breath. Ken just walked beside him, head down, drained from the whole situation. Then, a car pulled up. 4 men stepped out, and just like that, the mood shifted again. Benito took one look at the men and already knew. This wasn't random. This was payback. One of them stepped forward, greeting him like they'd been waiting for this moment. Ken asked who they were, and luckily, the man spoke Japanese. So he explained. They were from the same city as Benito. Then it got ugly. One said he seduced his wife, another his sister, another his girlfriend, and the last, yeah, even his mother. Ken just stared at Benito like, what the hell did you do? The men weren't joking either. They said they'd been hunting him, swore they'd cut him down piece by piece. Ken told Benito they should just retreat, reminded them Benito was mafia. It didn't matter. The men laughed it off. They were mafia too. After killing Benito, they even planned to go after Don Prigo next. They weren't afraid of anyone. Benito didn't waste another second. He bolted, jumped straight over the Coliseum wall like it was nothing, clean, smooth, almost unreal. Parkour. Gone in an instant. The men pulled out their guns and chased after him without hesitation, shots ringing out, bullets hitting stone, dust flying everywhere.
Benito kept moving, jumping across ruins, walls, broken structures, barely slowing down. He couldn't believe they were actually shooting inside the Colosseum, a place like this, a national treasure. But they didn't care. All that mattered was killing him. Then, from below, Ken's was. Ken called Benito crazy for still running like that. Benito looked down, surprised. Ken was still there. Didn't run, didn't leave. Ken asked him casually, "Need help?" Benito didn't even hesitate. Yes. Ken grinned, that same dangerous grin, then said, "Sorry, I'm heading to the swimming pool." And just like that, he turned away.
Benito completely lost it. He dropped to his knees, yelling at Ken, calling him a traitor, a coward, anything he could think of. Ken just laughed, waved goodbye like it was nothing. But Benito didn't stop. He begged, actually begged him not to leave. That made Ken pause. He stood there for a second, still smiling, still laughing under his breath. Benito bowed his head and said he'd forget everything he saw. No questions, no trouble. That's when Ken's smile changed. Yeah, this was exactly what he wanted. The plan worked. Ken told him something before moving. If the enemy scares you, don't run away. Run straight at them. And then he moved. Straight into the middle of the four men. No hesitation, no warning. The first one didn't even react in time. Ken's fist hit him clean. Dropped. Second one, same thing. Third, gone. It was fast, way too fast, like their health bars just disappeared. The last one panicked and ran. Big mistake. Ken chased him down without slowing, then launched a kick. Both of them went flying off the edge. For a second, it looked insane. Free fall, straight down. They crashed on a parked car below. Metal crushed on impact. Ken landed on top of it, steady, like he meant to do that. The guy he kicked, pinned underneath him, out cold. Silence. Benito just stood there, staring. He couldn't process it. Everything he saw didn't make sense. And for the first time, he felt it clearly. That urge to follow someone, to understand him. Ken. Benito slowly straightened up. Yeah, he had to report this. Don Prego needed to know, because whatever Ken was, he wasn't normal.
Back at the castle, Benito said his goodbyes to Don Prego. The old man agreed to let him go, but not with a condition, a task. Next thing, Tae-soo accepted Benito into the group. Don Prego made it clear Benito wasn't just some extra, he was supposed to be his successor, so he told them to take good care of him. And just like that, Benito left Italy with Ken's crew. Cut to Korea. Airport, cars waiting, straight to their base. Inside the car, Benito stayed quiet, thinking about the task. Don Prego told him everything Tae-soo believed about Ken, that he could become something greater. So Benito's job was simple, watch him, and if it turns out to be wrong, get rid of him. They arrived. Benito stepped inside and immediately lost it. The place was tiny. He looked around confused, almost offended, asked if the whole casino owner thing was just a lie. Ken just shrugged and said no, it's real. That somehow made it even weirder. Benito decided to stick close to Ken, went with him to his lodging, then saw the room. Small, bare, nothing impressive. He just stood there and said it looked worse than a prison back in Italy. He expected at least a hotel, something that matched who Ken was. But nope, this was it. Then Ken dropped something unexpected. If Benito really wanted to be part of them, he had to go to Mount Jiri. Training. Benito didn't even hesitate. He smiled, said he loved climbing anyway. Ken said they'd go now since the head monk wasn't around. Should be easy. 3 months later, Benito came back. Or something that looked like Benito. Bald, long beard, clothes torn up, looking like he just crawled out of the mountains. Everyone just stared. Pickaxe burst out laughing, asking what happened to his hair. Benito calmly thanked God like a monk, said his hair couldn't survive 3 months of meditation. But something changed. His Korean improved, even picked up different dialects. For a moment, it felt like he actually evolved, like the training did something real. Then, 15 days later, he was back to his usual self. Same attitude, same personality, like nothing ever happened. And somehow, that made it even funnier.
All right, we'll leave it here. From Ken living a double life, running between a date and a gang like his life depends on it, to Benito, a mafia hitman, stepping into the picture. From a normal outing turning into chaos, to Ken throwing hands in the Colosseum like it's nothing. Benito tested him, watched him, and found proof after proof. Not just strength, but something worth following. Now he's in Korea, watching closer than ever. And this time, it's not just curiosity, it's a mission. If you're enjoying the story, like the video, subscribe, and stay with us.